LBC weather, a wet and blustery night for Scotland, Wales, the South West and Northern Ireland. Rain clearing for the rest of England, but with icy patches, a low of -2. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lucinda Horsley.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Well, it's Tuesday, it's 8 o'clock, time for our Tuesday night big interview. You can watch us over the course of the next hour. We're streaming all of this on the LBC and indeed our Facebook page and Twitter feed and YouTube channel. And that's because we are in the company of Mick Cash, who is the leader of the RMT Trade Union. Good evening.
Good evening.
For our listeners, RMT stands for?
Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers.
Which is actually a huge sector, isn't it, when you think about it?
It is indeed, yeah. We look after members in the railway industry, the biggest proportion of our membership, road transport, the buses and road freight, offshore in terms of the oil rigs. We do even canals and Thames workers, and we do seafarers.
And if somebody...
Taxi drivers as well, by the way. I shouldn't forget taxi drivers.
Don't ever forget taxi drivers. Goodness me. If somebody comes to you and say, look, I like the work that you do, you really fight for your members, you get good pay increases, I want to join you even though I work as a white-collar worker in an office, do you say, well, actually, that isn't how it works?
Well, we've got quite a diverse membership anyhow, across all the grades. We're an industrial trade union, so we organise across all the sectors. We don't differentiate whether you're white or blue collar. It's important.
No, but I mean, in a different sector, say it was, I don't know, retail sector or something.
Well, no, I think you've got to try and focus in on the sectors that you specialise in, and we're a specialist transport union, so we do that. There's other unions for workers in different sectors, and we wouldn't want to get into a situation like Marks and Sparks do with Morrison's in terms of trying to compete.
You do compete a bit, don't you? Because Unite have quite a big transport section.
They have a transport section.
Used to be the Transport and General Workers Union.
It did indeed, and it's merged to create, and they do a good job for their members, and we do a good job for our members.
But you do have a bit of competition with ASLEF, don't you?
Again, I mean, we're a trade union. We've been around since 1871. I like quoting this, by the way, but we're the first railway union, although we're now a specialist transport union. We've been around as long as the FA Cup, which was first played in 1871, by the way. And in those days, we were called the Amalgamated Society of Railway Servants. And in those days, there was only one railway union, and it was us. There's now 2 or 3 railway unions, and I would like to get back to the day where there is only one railway union, because I think we're all stronger and better off for it.
Do you actually get on with each other? Because there has been quite a bit of rivalry between the RMT and ASLEF over the years.
Well, I think it's fair to say sometimes when you've got different trade unions who've got different perspectives, you get a lot of creative tension, and we do that, and there has been friction, but you know, we are united in our one goal of making sure that workers are well protected in the industries we negotiate in. So there are sometimes frictions, but more often than not, that's overcome by the fact that we want to look after our members and make sure that they're well looked after. And importantly, by the way, the industries that we represent. There's only one organisation that's been around the rail industry longer than us, and that's the Her Majesty's Railway Inspectorate.
Well, there you go. Somebody's pointing out that Usdaw also have a transport section, which I have to say I didn't know.
Indeed.
Listen, if anybody wants to ask Mick a question over the course of the next hour, be my guest, 0345 6060 973. Let's talk a bit more generally before we come on to the railways. What do you see the role of a trade union as in 2020, compared to, say, 1970?
Well, actually, the role today is as it was when we were first founded, is to look after our members, look after their safety, look after their interests, make sure that they go to work in the morning and come home at night, make sure they have decent pensions, make sure they have decent paying conditions. There's no difference throughout our history. There's one common thread that we have, is that we've been looking after the workers who operating industries where we operate, and making sure that they were looked after, because if they're well looked after, then the industries, the people they serve, will be well looked after. That hasn't changed. Maybe we may have mobile phones these days and apps and whatnot. Back in the day, they would have had something different.
I suppose the reason I asked the question is because trade union membership has declined hugely since the heyday, I suppose, of trade unions in the 1970s. There must be a reason for that. People don't see trade unions as relevant to their lives as maybe they once used to. So how can you change people's view on that?
Well, I agree. I mean, I joined the NUR, as it was in those days, National Union Railway.
Sid Wheel.
Yeah, well,
I remember
otherwise
him.
known as No Use Rushing, but that's another little acronym. But as an 18-year-old, as a teenager, and in those days, you had to join the pension scheme and you had to join the railway. Two best decisions ever made for me. Because I wouldn't have done it at the age of 18, because I would have spent the money on those two things on something else if I was that age. And yet today, and I talk about this when I go to our conference and talk to our people, and this week I'm in Glasgow talking to 50 of our delegates who are young members, that's under the age of 30, about what it is about being a trade union today, and making sure that we look after people, we look after the industries that they work in, because it's the same. Our DNA is in those industries, and their DNA is in us. We're very inextricably linked. So it's no different than what it was back in those days. That we are there to make sure that working people are looked after. You are right, Don, and it's an interesting point. There's about 32 million people work in this country. Whether they've got full-time jobs is another matter, by the way, and there's only 6.5 million in the trade union. And that is a failing in our society, and failing in the trade union movement, I have to say. But I'll tell you this.
But why? Why is it?
Do you know what? There's a variety of reasons, and even in the heyday back in the 70s, it was 14 million people in a trade union. And the reality was that there was more workers covered by collective bargaining, but even those workers who weren't covered by collective bargaining benefited from it, because there wasn't that push down to the lowest common denominator. I would argue that if you had 30 million people in the trade unions today, you would have decent pensions, you would have a lot safer workplaces, you wouldn't have 0 hours contracts, and you wouldn't have the casualisation, and you wouldn't have the friction in our country that we've got today, because you'd have people there making sure that the workplace was properly regulated and that exploitation couldn't happen.
But you would have thought that people who are on 0 hours contracts, casual contracts, there is a difference, but however you want to describe them, you would have thought that if they were so unhappy, they would be flocking to trade unions to try and change the system.
Yeah, and the problem about being in a trade union and collectivism is you've got to get a load of people together and confirm to them that they'll get something in double quick time. And the reality is what happened in the change to society. I've been in the union since 1970. I've seen our society change. I saw what Thatcher done in terms of breaking down the whole structure, and Thatcherism did in terms of breaking down the whole structure of our society, is that people don't think as one anymore. Yet the reality is this is where you stand together, where you work together and where you fight together, you will stand to benefit from that. And that's what good modern trade unions are about. It's not just about offering a credit card, but it's about looking after people.
Margaret Thatcher, whatever you think of her, she articulated the case for the individual against the collective in a way.
No such thing as society.
Well, yeah, we could debate that one. She got totally misinterpreted over that. But
really?
That's another subject.
Oh, is it?
But you collectively, I'm not saying you individually, but you collectively in the trade union movement have failed to communicate the need for collective action.
Well, you're up against a whole cadre of people having a go at you in terms of governments and employers who try and say to people, you're individuals, you don't work together. They do that to divide them, but they don't mind uniting the profits and the output from those individual workers. Our job is to communicate to workers. It's never been easy, by the way, and it never has, and it never will be easy. But if you can get workers standing together, they're a lot stronger than they would be if they're on their own. The one thing I say to people is, if you're in a union, you're never on your own. I'm not saying we're perfect, but you are never on your own.
Graham has texted in to say the decline in union membership is due to the end of the closed shop. You had to be a member or you lost your job. Now, I suspect there's a certain element of truth to that. And from what you've just said, you sound as if you might be sympathetic to the closed shop.
Well, I joined when it was a closed shop. 1978, I had to join the union, I had to join the pension scheme. Recently the government, I think it was a Tory government, introduced auto-enrolment pensions because to do so, if it didn't, working people, when they come to retire, will not have money to pay for their retirement, to live in some sort of good way during retirement. The same is in terms of the workplace. I don't want to force people into trade union. I don't want to force people to take industrial action. I do want to give them a choice. But there's a hell of a lot of obstacles to making sure people can join a trade union these days. And employers actually actively encourage workers not to join in trade unions because they get their own way if that happens. You're never on your own if you're in a trade union.
But the way that you're talking, it's almost as if people are sort of so stupid that they fall for the employer's propaganda, but they're not falling for your propaganda, are they? They're making that choice. You may not agree with the choice, but aren't they making an informed choice? Or are you saying that employers are generally effectively forcing them into not joining a union?
I would never accuse anyone of being stupid. And I'm not saying that now. I think it's a situation where people turn around. I mean, if we offered everyone complete free membership for 20 years, I suspect we'd have a load of people join because they'll make judgments around whether or not they want to join a trade union, and fundamentally it'll be around what we can do for them, and that's why we in the union, in our union in particular, still have a growing membership. And because yes, we do. Yes.
How many members have you got?
Just over 81,000.
And compared to say 10 years ago?
Again, 10 years ago it would have been a lot less than that, 76,000.
And what do you put that down to? Your brilliant leadership, or Bob Crow's brilliant leadership, maybe?
Bob.
Because I would sit here and say that I thought that Bob Crow was one of the best trade union leaders this country has ever had, because he delivered for his members in a way that I think lots of other trade union leaders have not over the years.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I worked with Bob. I worked with Bob from 2002 until he sadly passed away in 2014, and I'd have him back in a heartbeat. I would, because he did a great thing for our union. But I also agree with you. He did a great thing for the trade union movement in articulating a particular way of making us viable to the current generation of people, and we still got to find ways of doing that.
He was also one of the most difficult people to interview, I found, in that he was often, I would interview him late afternoon, and he invariably tended to be in a pub, and there was always a lot of noise in the background, and it was almost impossible to interrupt him. But I did enjoy my encounters with him, I have to say. He was a good
boss. I worked with him. He was a good boss.
Right, we'll take some of your calls and questions in a moment. More from Mick Cash, the leader of the RMT, in just a moment too. It's 8:16.
This is LBC.
In our secondary schools, the average class size continues to rise. Help your child stand out with Get My Grades, the ultimate online learning platform for English, maths and science, with textbook content, exam-style questions and progress tracking. Try it free at getmygrades.co.uk. Then get your first month for just £1 using code RADIO. Learn the smart way. getmygrades.co.uk. T's and C's apply. Cancel any time or continue at £9 per month.
If you want to be big, you've got to think big. That's why at Big Motoring World, we're growing even bigger with a brand new car supermarket near Enfield. It's a big one with massive savings and a gazillion cars. Go big. Go Big Motoring World in Stratford, East London, in Kent, and now open in Enfield. See bigmotoringworld.co.uk.
Big Motoring World.
Here's the thing about block management. If you do it yourself,
you're over here sorting out the insurance, and here keeping everything compliant. Don't forget the grounds maintenance and the service charges.
And that's just what you need to do today. But because the ABC Estates block management team can look after every aspect of your property portfolio, from repairs to service charge collections, your time can, at last, be better spent elsewhere. Be as happy as Larry with block management from Aldermartin, Baines and Cuthbert. Talk to us today. Call 0800 888 6688 or visit abcestates.co.uk.
Listen to this. That's the sound of your money doing absolutely nothing. At Hargreaves Lansdowne, we'll help you switch your money on. Over 1 million people trust us with their investments. We can help you make your money work harder too. Find out how you can switch your money on with a Stocks and Shares ISA from Hargreaves Lansdowne. Visit hl.co.uk. Investing puts your capital at risk. You could get back less than you invest.
You can't stop a sneeze. But with Dettol, you can help stop it spreading from surface to surface. Kill 99.9% of bacteria and cold and flu viruses living on your surfaces. Clean it, kill it, and help stop the spread of cold and flu with Dettol. See instructions on pack.
The moment you realise you've no hot water and you've cancelled your gym membership so you can't use their shower. The moment you realise you're covered by British Gas Home Care. From £14 a month, that's just 46p a day. You've someone to turn to 24/7. Buy selected home care cover online by the 10th of March and get 1 month free. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply. Prices vary by postcode.
Ian Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
19 minutes past 8. We're in the company of Mick Cash, the leader of the RMT trade union. You can watch us on YouTube, on the LBC YouTube channel, the Facebook page, Twitter feed and the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. We've been talking about the role of trade unions in 2020 as opposed to the past. Let's talk about the railways a bit, because the railways seem to be virtually the only sector in our society now that it seems to be constantly bedeviled by strikes. And people used to think that Bob Crow would sort of call a strike ballot at the drop of a hat. And it does seem to be on particular lines that misery is being inflicted on an annual basis, or not just on an annual basis, several times a year on some lines. What's your response to that? Because strike action to many seems to be a bit of an old-fashioned way of reacting to a dispute.
Well, no, I mean, I don't necessarily believe that we're bedeviled by strikes, but those strike actions do have an impact because of the impact they're having, and we are at this moment in time in the midst of a spate of industrial action which has been going on for almost 3.5 years now, which is the longest in our union's history. You heard me talk about how long we've been around, since 1871. We don't normally go into these industrial action, but it's to do with driver-only operation, where the government set its stall out as far back as 2010 to make trains operate without a second safety critical person, called driver-only operation. And they sought to introduce it over the last 3.5 years, and our members have stood up and said, no, we want our trains to have that second safety critical person, and that means that we believe the trains will be more safe, more secure, more accessible. And it's taken a long while, but we've managed to, convince quite a lot of people about the need for having a second safety critical person on every train, and we wouldn't have done that without actually taking industrial action.
You say the government, isn't it the railway companies?
No, it's been the government and the railway companies. They're a nice double act, actually, in terms of getting a situation where, for the government, they want to cut the subsidies to the industry, and for the private operators, they want to maximise their profits, and the pair of them have been a nice little double act, trying to get rid of the guards, because if you have less staff on stations, your costs go down, and you can maximise your profits in regards to the operators and reduce your
But there are plenty of lines that do run driver-only trains.
Yeah, the vast majority operations, and we've been fighting driver-only operations since 1985. In those days, it was seen as a productivity measure. About saving money. These days, they kind of say it's a safe method operation. Our members don't believe so, and we've sought to make sure we stick there.
Traditional railway line, but the Docklands Light Railway operates quite successfully.
Well, the Docklands Light Railway actually does have somebody on making sure that on
every train.
Yes, I do. I've been on trains and I've watched them make sure that the train dispatch process is operated and make sure passengers get on and off the train. One of the biggest risks to passengers these days, actually, and if you think about it, with overcrowded trains, overcrowded platforms, over 1 billion people a year using the railway, it's actually getting on and off the trains, and that's a crucial role that the Guard oversees.
So are you looking at strike action at all in the next few months?
In some companies, yes. You will know that we've announced taking industrial action South Western Railways on the 9th and 12th of March because despite the fact we've had a fresh ballot, we've had 6 ballots now under the new trade union laws. Back in January, we announced a new strike ballot result where our members, once again for the 6th time, our Guard members, 800 odd members on South Western, supported taking industrial action to keep a Guard on the train. And we're deeply frustrated that despite our efforts, we haven't got a proposal from the company to resolve the dispute despite everywhere else that we've got it. We are getting resolution to those disputes and keeping a Guard on the train and keeping that train safe, secure and accessible.
I've had quite a few texts on this subject, so I'm going to ask you this, even though I feel slightly uncomfortable doing so. It's Tim in Canterbury has asked this. Please ask your guest how he justifies a salary of $163,000 for such a small union membership.
I don't have a salary of $163,000.
What is it then?
My basic rate of pay is about $100,000. That's the overall cost.
Several people are quoting that figure, so they must have got it from somewhere.
They've got it from the media. They look at the overall package that I get, and that's my salary. But what I actually get in wages, it's a bit like if their overall package, including national insurance, pensions, and whatnot, will be what they get. Ultimately, my members decide what I get, and every year they vote on whether I get a pay rise or not, and that's what they decide.
Let's look at the relationship that the RMT has with the Labour Party, because you, as a union, disaffiliated from the Labour Party some time ago. There were discussions, I think, last year or the year before as to whether you should re-affiliate, but you decided not to. Why was that?
Well, we want to support politicians, to support our members and support our objectives, and we took the view that we would like to not be aligned to any one political party so that we could pursue that objective, and that's what we continue to do. We've got we operate in all the parliaments, whether it be in Scotland, Wales or in London, with politicians and MPs and MSPs and AMs that support our objectives, and that works well for us.
I suppose a lot of people think, well, you got Jeremy Corbyn as Labour leader. He had much more left-wing policies than his predecessor. And you would have thought that the RMT would think, well, we'll gain a lot from having a Labour government. So people find it odd that you didn't rejoin when Jeremy Corbyn was leader.
Yeah, but we had a discussion in the union at the time. Way back, I think it was 2018. It was 50-50 between whether we should affiliate.
What was your personal view?
What was my personal view? At the time, I thought we should re-affiliate, but we sat down and we worked through as a union what we should do, and our union was split. And in those circumstances, we took the decision: let's not create a division over something when our focus should be on making sure we look after our members at the workplace.
Is there anything that the Labour Party stood on at the last election that you really didn't agree with?
Not really. I mean, the reality in the parliamentary democracy is bums on seats in that Palace of Varieties at Westminster that matter. But
you could have helped get more Labour bums on seats if you'd supported them and maybe given them a bit of money.
Well, we got bums on seats, but not the right bums on seats.
That's an interesting way of putting it. You, I don't know whether it's you personally or as a union, you backed Brexit.
I voted for Brexit, and our union voted for Brexit. Yeah, supported Brexit.
Why?
Well, we've had a policy since 1979, which was 4 years after the referendum that took us into or kept us in Europe. I was only 15 at the time, by the way. I didn't get a vote then. To get out of Europe because we didn't like what it meant and what it was going to do. I mean, it's just bizarre these days that we're in a situation where Boris is taking us out of Europe, but he's allowing a lot of European governments to operate our railways. I find that a very strange way to have Brexit.
Should we take some calls? Because we've got lots lined up. So if you want to put your headphones on,
take these things out. And
Graham, you're in Guildford. What would you like to ask Mick?
Hello, Ian. Thank you very much. Hello, Mick.
Hello.
Let me just say initially, I've been a member of TGWU for about 14 years, and another union for another 14 years. And I can't praise them enough for the help that they've given me. Okay. My partner works in a care home, nursing home, which doesn't recognise unions apparently. And I didn't know whether that was legal or not. And she's had a few problems in the past. And I said, look, why don't you try Unison? And she said, well, what's the point if it's just me? Can she join a union and get the same sort of protection that I had when I was sort of with about another 10,000 other people in my union?
Yeah, and the reality is it's not easy to get recognition. The current laws about getting trade union recognition were introduced by Tony Blair. Prior to that, we didn't have it, and this gives a lot of opportunities for bosses and sometimes getting anti-union consultants in to help them stop unions being recognised. But it's not easy just to get unions. But I would always say go to the union. It would be Unison in terms of healthcare and others, because there's quite a few. The TUC tend to, if you go to TUC website, I'll tell you the union for your particular sector, and join. And it's one at a time sometimes, but if you build enough density, you will have the opportunity under the legislation to get recognition. The problem is that some people just look as if they think that they're on their own, and it is difficult.
What it's been up till now. Everybody thought that that they don't recognise unions, so there's no point in us joining one. But I mean, she really could do with the protection of a union. I know the benefits of them in the past.
Yeah, well,
it could help her.
It's really important that if you've got your fellow workmates and they want to get together and work, and you're having difficulties in the workplace, then there are a number of phone calls, a number of places you can go. I would direct you to the TEC website in the main, where you can get in contact with the trade unions that organise in that sector. You don't have to tell the employer what you're doing. There is a process until you're ready to do that. There is a process for getting recognition, and once recognition is given, then you can elect your own representatives, and you can have union support to make sure you can bargain on the issues that affect you day in, day out.
OK, Graham, thank you very much indeed for your call. Brian Rotherham says, you're happy, Mr Dale, for politicians to steal 84 grand a year of taxpayers' money in expenses. Actually, that's the salary. And yet here you are bitching about 100,000 in wages. They should strike every day and shut down that corrupt city. I wasn't bitching at all. I was just reading out a couple of texts from people who wanted to know the answer to a question. Anyway, let's take some more of your calls in a moment. It's 8:30. Let's get the latest news headlines on LBC from Lucinda Horsley.
3 further coronavirus deaths have been confirmed in Italy, while the government here is telling people returning from the country to self-isolate if they've been to certain areas. Several schools have also sent pupils home after half-term Italian ski trips. Lib Dem peer Lord Steele has resigned from the party after a damning report into child sex abuse at Westminster. It accused him of inaction over allegations relating to the late MP Cyril Smith. The head of the Environment Agency says we need to accept hard truths that it won't be able to protect some communities in future. His comments came as the River Aire burst its banks in East Yorkshire. In Shropshire, the River Severn's expected to hit record levels tonight. LBC weather, a wet and blustery night for Scotland, Wales, the South West and Northern Ireland. Rain clearing for the rest of England, but with icy patches, a low of -2.
This is LBC.
Looking for your perfect kitchen? Visit roomsense.co.uk.
Quality at a price you can afford. That's RoomSense.
How much money will you get when you sell your car?
11,000.
12,000.
12,600.
£13,000.
Wouldn't it be great if you could see offers from online buyers and specialist car dealers all in one place? Motorway.co.uk is the comparison site to sell your car. With Motorway, it's easy to compare offers and find your best deal. You could get up to £1,000 more. Go to motorway.co.uk, the easy way to sell your car for more.
Motorway.co.uk.
You switch. You theme park.
You log ride. And remember, she's too small for the log ride. You buy ice cream. You win a teddy. You visit the lions. You don't bang on the glass. You promise not to shout again. You buy more ice cream. More people come to us to find their broadband, energy and mobile deal than any other switching site. What you do after, well, it's up to you.
Uswitch. Broadband, energy, mobiles. More people claim based on share of web traffic. Visit uswitch.com/verify.
A change is coming. Millions of people across the UK are realising that if their broadband's out of contract, they could be out of pocket. So it's time to switch and save with Vodafone Superfast Broadband for £21.95 a month. Join the Great British Broadband switch today. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
18-month contract subject to credit check. Publicly available out of contract, non-promotional pricing. Superfast 1, 73% of customers receive sync speeds above 35 megabits per second. See vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Turn onto the main high road past Tottenham Football Club, where cameras caught 6 untaxed vehicles this week. In 200 yards, turn right onto Lordship Lane, where the DVLA clamped 4 untaxed vehicles yesterday. Turn left onto Mount Pleasant Lane, where this month 6 untaxed vehicles have been towed just ahead of you. If your car is untaxed anywhere in North London, the DVLA will find it. Tax yours at gov.uk/DVLA/taxitnow. Remember, tax it or lose it.
Choose Swell Heating and you get a lot more than an efficient boiler from top manufacturers like Quista Bosch. There are warranties of up to 10 years, experts to install your boiler, a 24/7 call centre and specialist advice on smart heating technology. Visit swellheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Ian Dale on LBC.
8:34, Mick Cash is here, the leader of the RMT Trade Union, taking your calls, 0345 6060 973. Peter is a new caller in Woking. Hello, Peter.
Good evening.
Hello, what would you like to ask?
I'm a season ticket holder on South West trains from West Byfleet up into Waterloo, and I'm looking for some help. I fully understand the view of the guards because they want to make sure they look after customers, and they do. And I fully understand the views of South West Trains. They want to move forward with new trains. All we need is some help and some compromise. In business these days, we all face problems. We can't stick our heads and be in the sand and be belligerent. We need help. So I wonder if Pat could give us some help to move things on, get to a solution, so the poor old commuters don't have days on end not able to get to work or get to watch the rugby.
Peter, I have to tell you, we haven't got the tennis player Pat Cash with us. We've got Mick Cash from the RMT.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Mr. Cash, Cash.
I'd take the compliment if I were you, Mick.
Well, you wouldn't be the first person who's called me Pat, by the way. Even people in the union.
I bet you've been called worse.
We've been called worse. Can I say I fully understand and your concerns. This dispute's been going on now for over 2.5 years. We've taken 67 days industrial action, which is unheard of in our union as such, and it is sad that we haven't got a situation where we've got a proposal to resolve the dispute. I don't know if you realise it, but I was at ACAS talks way back in December last year, and I was sitting there with my reps, and I've had a number of meetings. I had meetings with the company before the current company, which is First Group and MTR. MTR being the Chinese state, and First Group, the Scottish group that runs a lot of buses. And I said to them, look, we shouldn't get into this dispute. There is a resolution. There is a way of doing it. This is before we even balloted our members 2.5 years ago, Peter. And there are solutions to this. We've got these solutions. We've done deals elsewhere. Let's see if we can do that. And it wouldn't give us the guarantee that they'd have a guard on the train. And it's taken a long while just to get something where we got anywhere near a position where they're prepared to give us some assurances that they'll have a second safety critical person on the train. And yet we still, last December, the first time our reps and myself seen a written proposal from the company about some sort of mechanism was last December, and that shows you where we are now. Elsewhere, we've been doing the same with other companies and getting deals. And I'm saying to Mark Hopwood, who's the managing director, we've called action of the current interim managing director of South West Railways, which is a basket case of a franchise, and has been from day one because of the way it's run and operated. to sit down with me and put a proposal to me that actually stops us taking that action going ahead on the 9th and 12th of March, because our members don't want to take any further industrial action. They feel they have to. I don't know if you heard the conversation earlier on where I said for the 6 times, we've balloted 6 times on South Western, our members, and 6 times in a row they've voted to take industrial action. And these are the same people day in, day out who work the trains, walk the trains, and want to provide the service, because they also come from the communities which they serve.
No, I think the Guards are terrific from a safety and a customer perspective. They're great people. They're very friendly and they look after us. But it's just I feel for the youngsters who are commuting into London. It's all right for some of the commuters who can afford it, but the youngsters have to get to work. And it's just not fair on them to have to try and get to work and they can't. So anything you can do to help move it along would be terrific. These days, everything's about win-win and compromise. And so anything you can do, Mick, would be terrific.
Well, can you assure you one thing, Peter? We have compromised in a number of areas in the deals that we've done elsewhere. We are prepared to sit down and work with South Western. Do you know what the difference is between us? They want there's about 3 or 4 seconds difference in dwell times. That's when the train stops and starts from a platform. That's the difference between us. We've given them, and we have done deals which deals with the issues that they've got, because they're worried about performance. Because if they don't perform well, they don't get their payments and they don't make their profits. We've offered to tackle those problems with them. We've got solutions to that, but for some reason are not prepared to turn around and put those solutions in writing to us to actually resolve this dispute. Deeply frustrating, and I agree with you about young people in particular suffering worse as a result of this industrial action. Our members don't want to do this, by the way, despite the fact they have voted 6 times, but they are determined because they know that if they don't stand up to this company, that we will see the end of a guard on the train, and they know passengers don't want that, and they certainly don't want it.
OK, Peter, thank you. Let's go to Mick on the Edgware Road in central London. Hello, Mick.
Hello, Ian. Thanks for taking the call.
Hi. What would you like to ask?
Basically, Mick Asher just said that he represents taxi drivers. I'm a London taxi driver. Now, over the last 3-4 years, especially under Sadiq Khan, successive roads have been taken away from taxi drivers by Camden Council, Islington Council, Hackney Council, Westminster Council. Sadiq Khan, in his Mayor's transport strategy, actually wrote us out of the Mayor transport strategy, taking us basically in the same place as public vehicles, normal cars. Boris Johnson included us in the Mayor's transport strategy, but no one is actually standing up for us. Mick said that he's got taxi drivers that he represents, and I happen to know a couple of the blokes on the taxi branch committee, and I know them very, very well. No one seems to be holding any of these councils to account for us, and it's almost making our job totally untenable now. We have to go so many miles out of the straight route to actually get people where they want to go. You know, no one's helping us.
Okay,
and the
right.
RMT, being a big union, I would have thought they'd have been all over this, like the rest, trying to protect their members, but they're doing nothing.
Mick, what's your response to Mick?
Well, I mean, you are right. There is a real threat to Hackney carriage taxis in London, as there is elsewhere where they're there, because you've got threats both from public authorities, whether it be Sadiq or other councils, who don't want to protect the that vital service that black cabs in particular provide. And it is.
So you're actually accusing the Mayor of London of saying that you don't think that he wants to protect black cabs at all.
No, it's 20. I mean, part of the black cab trade is there's 25,000 or about 20,000 black cab drivers in London. There's whole hosts of huge amount of private hire, and as well as Uber Uber and others, and they're under a real threat from modern technology, and it's not regulated properly. And I've called on Sadiq before to regulate the market, to give a level playing field for the black cabs to make sure they're sustainable.
In what way? Because he's just granted a new licence to another Uber equivalent, Ola, and you think, well, aren't there enough minicabs on London's roads as it is?
Exactly. So they're facing a huge problem from the fact that Uber and whatnot, in terms of the right to hire, the right to apply for hire. In that they do it through these new technology, and whereas the black cabs have got to drive around the road and get hailed from the road, whereas they're saying that doing it through apps and such like is not the same, and that it's a lot easier and not more convenient. But that threatens that population of the black cabs in London, and it is a vital service to the people of London, and we will miss it if it's not protected. I mean, if they can protect cheese and they protect wines, why can't they protect our black cab and the black cab trade? That's what I argue for. Sadiq Action, I've argued this with Sadiq, that he should be going to Parliament and trying to get a proper regulation of the cab trade in London. And that does include making sure that they have proper facilities, including places where they can park or where they can have ranks to provide services to passengers. The reality is, though, there's far too many of them broken, not in a trade union or in individual groupings that are actually playing their own trough rather than coming together. If we were in one trade union, by the way, and we organised across the whole of London, we would be a lot stronger.
Mick, come back.
It's not about you mentioned Uber and all the others. It's not about that. We cater for a totally different clientele. That's not the issue. Our issue is the fact that we cannot go on the roads that we've trained for. We've been excluded from certain roads. The City of London has excluded us from Bank Junction. The City of London in March is excluding us from Beach Street and Chiswell Street in Barbican. Tottenham Court Road, we're going to be excluded from that in the next 6 to 8 months. Streets in Hackney, you've got Wapping High Street, Wapping Gate, where they...
Well, this is all getting a bit parochial, Mick, if you don't mind me saying so.
It's the roads. Without the roads, we can't do a living.
But isn't this much simpler than you're making out? Because if you're not allowed on them, others aren't as well. This is all about it being made much more difficult, not just in London, but in cities all over the country. The transport authorities in all these cities don't want cars in the city centres, so they're trying to make it as difficult as possible for anybody to drive a car.
I'll answer that one for you, Ian. In York, they banned cars, not taxis, not private hire vehicles. They banned the use of public cars. So if you go to York and you drive a taxi, you can drive through the streets of York quite happily, and you can take people where they want to go. We're in a situation, the taxi trade, not all of the taxi trade, but a fair number of us were demonstrating in Parliament Square for most of last year.
I know, I was there with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But our main gripe is that where buses go, taxis should go. Sadiq Khan has written us out the Mayor's transport strategy.
Okay, all right, look.
But Mick, I'd agree with you as well. I mean, if you want to have access to the same routes as buses, then you should have the access because you provide the same sort of service.
All right, we'll take some more. Mick, thank you. We'll take some more calls to Mick Cash in just a moment. It's 8:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Weekday mornings from 7. LBC.
Bragging to friends he thought he'd be cleared of sex crimes, ready to set up a trust in his name that thought would rehabilitate him. Harvey Weinstein now has gone to jail. Rowena Chu.
I was Harvey Weinstein's assistant for only a couple of months when I was assaulted by him in a hotel room in Venice in 1998. It was only the second time that I was alone with him, and he asked me my opinion on the scripts, and we began talking, and then very rapidly the talk would turn to something personal. After a number of unsavoury requests for massages and so on and so forth, I feel very deeply for the 6 women who were brave enough to take the stand, and I really applaud their fortitude married. I can't imagine. I think it must be an incredibly traumatic and triggering thing to do.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Xero, get your business digital ready with Xero accounting software.
LBC.
The first thing Goodwin Barrett told me was that I could make a claim for compensation myself, and if unsuccessful, refer it to the Financial Ombudsman for free. I looked at it, but I'd rather spend time on something else. If you've lost money on an investment such as a stocks and shares ISA or investment bond, missold by a bank or financial advisor, as a claims management company, Goodwin Barrett can take your claim, from investigation to compensation and everything else in between. Text GOOD to 78900. That's GOOD to 78900.
Keep coming. Yeah, bit more.
At Hey Car, you'll find the best used cars all in one place. Every car is quality checked and comes with a warranty. So finding your perfect used car is easy. You just need somewhere to park it.
Back. Whoa. Yeah, great. Stop.
To find your perfect used car, search Hey Car.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
I read Stan. Will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
You can't stop a sneeze. But with Dettol, you can help stop it spreading from surface to surface. Kill 99.9% of bacteria and cold and flu viruses living on your surfaces. Clean it, kill it, and help stop the spread of cold and flu with Dettol. See instructions on pack.
If you started your own furniture store today, you might not call it Fishpools. But if it was $18.99 and your name was Ernest Fishpool, well, it actually was. And he actually did. These days, Fishpools in Waltham Cross is one of the largest furniture stores in the southeast, with a stunning range of on-trend designs. There's up to 50% off in our winter sale, but only until Sunday. See it all in-store and at fishpools.co.uk. That's a website, Ernest?
Jim from Nuneaton writes, "You were everything I desired. Perfection. I only had eyes for you, but before I really knew it, you were gone, leaving just an empty box behind. I just want you back. Your 2 juicy patties, crisp lettuce, gherkins, onions, cheese, and my favourite Big Mac sauce."
You can now spend even longer with the taste you love with the Grand Big Mac, but only until the 24th of March. Served after 11 a.m, subject to availability, participating restaurants only.
Leading Britain's conversation. Ian Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's coming up to 10 to 9 on LBC. We're going to have a slight change of plans at 9 o'clock. We were going to talk to the Tory MP who bared all in a pub, but we've decided to change subjects. And because of the response we're going to talk about him, not to him, but we're going to change the subject because of the response in the news hour with your texts and calls on the Westminster paedophile inquiry, which reported today. So stay tuned for that at 9 o'clock. Right, we've got Mick Cash with us. We'll take more calls to him. He's the leader of the RMT trade union. Stephen's in Westminster. Hi, Stephen.
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to ask?
It's about the Crossrail project in central London.
Okay.
Because it should have been up and running in 2018. What's happening about it?
Well, it's been delayed, hasn't it? That's what's happened.
I mean, it hasn't worked very well, that's for certain. And as a project, it's important for the infrastructure of London, but how it's been delivered is nothing short of a disgrace. I don't think anybody wants to welcome the way it is, and the fact that it's having a big impact on the mayor's budget, for example, and creating a situation where money that instead of getting revenue, they're putting money in and having to borrow money to fill the gaps that they've got because there's people not using that service.
What do you put that down to?
Well, do you know, I talk to people and they talk about these technical things and the whole construction of it. And I've been to one of the sites, I was showing it. It's unbelievable. And what they've done is absolutely magnificent. But then they suddenly found that there's a lot of these technological equipment that they needed to be able to run the services in different ways. Some of it was designed 10, 15 years ago, and suddenly they say it's not going to work. So somebody, in my view, has lost their eye on the ball, and they've looked at the construction side of it without thinking what the gubbins that go in the middle of it all, and kept.
But you see, politicians get the blame for this. Sadiq Khan has got the blame. Boris Johnson has got the blame. But in the end, it's not a politician's fault, that kind of thing, is it? It's the people who are managing the project.
Well, the people who manage the project have got a case to answer, and but they are overseen and I know I would have thought been given regular reports. The issue is whether they've been completely and utterly negligent to the politicians and kept them in the dark. You do get a sense that why all of a sudden has this happened, because these things we would have thought would have come out in a lot earlier stage where they could have dealt with it. And I mean, it's signalling equipment, I'm told. I mean, I was an S&T technician. I understand some of the signalling issues, but I couldn't. When I was on the railway, I spent 23 and a half years on the railway before I'd done this job. And I can get technically how they're going, but I think, well, why have the people who are overseeing it not dealt with those issues in good enough time?
Because that's a pretty basic thing, signalling. I mean, knowing nothing about railways at all, but I do know that if you don't get the signalling right, you haven't got a railway.
Yeah, indeed it is. And the problem they've got is, I think, for the whole stretch of Crossrail, because it's not just the 9 miles, which is operated by TfL, which is the tunnel section, which is automatic, is you've got about 4 or 5 different signalling systems that the trains have got to operate. But they've known this from day one, or they should have known it from day one. And you would have thought they'd have factored all these things in when they designed the arrangements. And the consequences are that there's a big black hole now appearing in terms of the money, and that's going to have consequences for the service. It shouldn't have happened.
And this doesn't bode well for HS2, does it?
Well, no, actually, HS2, in some respects, will be a lot easier. Bespoke lines, because if you look at what happened with HS1, with the line down to Dover, that was a whole new set of track, and it's one complete signalling system. And the trains that will operate that and the signalling systems that will operate it will actually be the most modern that there is. So that in itself isn't going to be the problem about HS2. It's the construction costs and all the other stuff that goes with it that's going to be problematic.
And did you breathe a sigh of relief when Boris Johnson announced that HS2 was going to be built?
Well, I think it says a lot about our country that we're prepared to have big projects like that. What I don't want to see is that creating a situation where money is spent off, you rob Peter to feed Paul, that money that could be spent on the railways is diverted, other parts of railways is diverted to HS2. It's an important thing for a north-south divide, but it's also important for the north of England to get across and to be able to connect it. I mean, you've got to remember the railways, which were predominantly built in the 19th century, were the network that actually created the country where we are today. And networks like that are crucial to making our country smaller and making everybody accessible.
That's really interesting.
Just like broadband is. The modern day version of it is broadband.
Because there are, well, indeed, but there are lots of ideas now to reopen a lot of the minor railway lines, which were closed down in the 1960s. I can remember as a 3-year-old child watching one of these lines at the bottom of my garden being taken up, and one of the cranes toppling over. I think it's my earliest memory. But I mean, for a comparatively small cost, in terms of compared to HS2, you could reopen a huge amount of these lines. That, I mean, assuming that they haven't been built on since.
Most have been built on, and you're right. When Beeching in the mid '60s decided to cut the rail network because it was unsustainable, because there was competition from cars. The road network was being expanded, and they contracted the rail network. We, as a trade union, by the way, made ourselves unpopular because we took industrial action against that at the time, because it said you're cutting your nose to spite your face. But we're not wrong, are we?
As it turns out, no.
So sometimes when we I make the point. We have our head office in London, and I bring people into head office in London. In our head office is a boardroom, and where we got a set of table and chairs which were made in 1910 for the Amalgamated Society of Railway Servants, when they created a new headquarters for the big union. It was in those days on Euston Road. Every key decision being made by our union since 1910 been made round that table and chairs, and people have sat on there, ordinary working people, and there's a big bookcase where there's loads of books recording the decisions made on those tables and chairs. And I bring people in and I say, look, we have been in this industry since 1871. We've been in this place since 1910. We are in a place where we don't just look at the industry in the 2 or 3 years or 5 years of what a politician does. We look at the long-term future. So HS2, coming back to it, will help us in terms of being the future for the long-term industry.
Let's finish off. I've just looked at the time and we haven't got long left, so let's finish off with David in Coventry. David, quickly your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Mechanic working tonight on his own in the wonderful cathedral city of Coventry banged his head last night on his own. Concerned, worried. There's all sorts of trip hazards and loads of health and safety issues. Company is obviously concerned that it might happen again and might not be found until tomorrow morning. Now, a company does not recognise unions, so I'll rather suspect they'd rather close the gate rather than recognise the union.
So what's your question, David?
What can we do as individuals, and what benefit would it be to join a union as individuals? Would it benefit us?
Well, the first thing you should join and then see what the union can do to deal with those issues, because what often happens with individuals who join a trade union, if you've got a concern, you've got somebody there can raise those issues. We need the facts, the information. They can take it on your behalf, and they can then start holding people to account for these safety breaches, and if necessary, bring in the safety regulators to deal with these companies. But we can be that third party that comes in and represents you and make sure that you're not putting the firing line.
Okay, David, thank you very much indeed. Well, Mick, thank you very much for joining us over the last hour. I hope you've enjoyed the experience. I think it's probably the longest interview that you've done on the media, and we'll be speaking to other trade unions trade union leaders during the course of the year. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be asking you about the Westminster child sex abuse inquiry. It's reported today on the alleged paedophile ring in Westminster, and it's found that it didn't exist. Lord Steele, David Steele, the former leader of the Liberal Party, he's come under a lot of fire for his reaction to the report, for failing to report what he knew about Sir Cyril Smith. I want to ask you what's changed between now and then, and how can we ensure that these kind of issues are reported, that if people suspect something, they are going to report it in a way that maybe they didn't in the 70s, 80s and 90s. Lines are open now, 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.